to change digital asset trading and files. So another day, another shenanigans in the crypto space. What a surprise. Next, New York Times, Apple signs a multi-year NFL deal, Ken, to have Apple Music replace Pepsi as the main sponsor of the Super Bowl halftime show. Sources say the NFL was seeking $50 million. And Apple says, I think we have a sofa cushion
You
around
got
here.
some couch cushion.
Yeah, we have a couple of spare 50 million laying around the parking lot somewhere. Someone get out the metal detector and find that 50
You
million.
know they're doing well when the underground parking garage there starts having art sculpture galleries down there. I've been to places that have that. You can just imagine Apple's version. They'll be like, no, we need even better design. And so they start having like these like glass sculptures and everything. And
Next up, Wall Street Journal.
What is wild is food and bev, and granted I'm biased, but food and bev is being squeezed out of sports because, I mean, we used to be awash with cash and profit, but now you got all these other companies that are just blowing it out and getting all these events named after them. That
but
is
they're consumer
fascinating.
sector.
What'd you say?
They're consumer sector. They sell to the same people. It would be
Ex-
considered entertainment, but the
I'm
thing
not
is,
saying that it's not, but one is that the sporting events are usually consuming something that's edible
I
or
mean, so
drinkable.
content is edible. It's just your eyeballs and your time that's being eaten rather than your calories and your health.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just saying it's just a fascinating transition.
Indeed.
Okay, Australian telecom company Optus hit by a cyber attack, potentially giving the hacker access to data on up to 9.8 million customers, and the police
Oh,
are investigating.
that's really bad because it's not just the customers. If you have upstream with the ISP themselves, that also affects the admins for the networks that depend on that as well. So those kind of attacks are extra valuable because that can allow you to man in the middle like an entire region. Those are
Right.
very valuable for espionage agencies.
Yeah. You can pose as a legitimate source, which opens the floodgates for future, uh, you know, bad behavior, very lucrative bad behavior. Um, the next is from Wired, a look at anti-pornography accountability apps used by churches and parents. Two apps are known to have exploited Android's accessibility permissions to track users' every move.
Stay away from this particular one. If you look at the ownership, it's literally Epstein money. I'm not even joking. It's literally the Ghislaine Maxwell, her sister. Seriously, look this up. Ghislaine Maxwell's sister runs this company.
Now, when you say Epstein, are you talking about the guy who liked to party with?
Yes, underage people and other things. This thing is
Okay, that's
this
what makes
with
sense.
particular
Donald
one right here.
Trump.
Yeah, this particular one, I'm going to call this out. Covenant Eyes has Israeli spy money attached to it. There's some sort of weird blackmail intelligence thing going on there. It's something really, really creepy is going on there. If you look into the ownership structure, the board structure, where it's been deployed historically, what the espionage value of it is, something creepy is going on there. I would stay as far away from it if you can.
They start with abortion rights and then they go after your masturbation. I told you.
Well, this has been 20. This is like a 20-year-old company, but yes.
Apple releases an update to iOS 16 to fix repeated copy and paste prompts, a bug that causes cameras in iPhone 14 Pro models to shake, etc. That's nice. And a look at the crowded podcast market where competition has made almost everything in the business more difficult, and some say no one is taking creative risks. Okay. New York
Haven't
Times.
spent enough time with tech news around the world.
And exactly. We're trying to do something new and blazing our own trail over here. A look at this is from the New York Times. A look at Germany's hate speech laws, which are more restrictive than other Western countries, as more than 1,000 people are charged or punished since 2018 for online speech crimes. Yeah, they're a little more sensitive to hate speech over there for reasons you might be able to figure out.
We were very serious when we said you need to not be Nazis anymore. Let's help you. Let's help inculturate anti-Nazism with things. And so they took it really, really deep. That was something we asked them to do after World War II, and they stuck with it a lot longer than a lot of groups did.
Uh, uh, um,
Yeah, it's crucial. Like Volksverhetzung is not allowed, so you cannot try to initiate people to like a larger group of people to become violent. So that's, for example, one of those very important ones you shouldn't do. Like you shouldn't go online and say, "Okay, let's all go out and hunt down." Some immigrant or some specific politician or something. For that, you get in trouble. And then any symbols related to Nazis, you get in trouble. You cannot also wear them outside on the streets. You get charged if you walk around with Nazi stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, next up, Fitbit plans to require a Google account for its new devices and features starting next year. And Google's Mandiant says it observed four separate instances of pro-Russian hacktivist groups publishing data within 24 hours of it being stolen by GRU, which is the Russian intelligence hacking, using wiper malware. And Russia's Mandiant says, we have never previously observed such a volume of cyber attacks, variety of threat actors, and coordination of effort. Bloomberg says in more than 70 lawsuits against Meta and Snapchat and TikTok and Google, parents are making product liability claims blaming algorithms for kids' mental health issues and more. Well, yeah, didn't we read like 2 months ago that there's now these platforms are going to be legally liable in some instances if you can prove, mental anguish or damages to kids, you can now sue those platforms. Wasn't there a bill passing that, and so that opened the floodgates for these types of lawsuits. And so far, there's only been 70 plus. I'm surprised it's so small considering the amount.
Class action though coming in here.
Yeah, the potential. I mean, all that.
This is like tobacco being exposed to secondhand smoke all over again. Oh shit, this thing that we put into everything that everyone's doing. Oh wait, it's actually causing harm. Can you know it was actually causing harm? And yes, we did it anyway, so that means you're liable. And let's essentially pay for damages for all of the psychology things to fix the people when to shove all this essentially auto-recommended, like torture porn or like, random people getting their heads chopped off in foreign countries. Oh yeah, we made money each time that happened. You throw that loop and you make just one company liable for that at a certain scale. Everyone else for trial lawyers is going to get really excited on that. When you start having that scale, you start having other groups saying, let's do corporate defense on that. And you start having the tech companies call the same groups that the oil companies, the tobacco companies, when they say, we have a large liability on our books, we need to make it go away. What political PR strategy do we need to engage in? What legal strategy do we need to engage in to make the liability disappear? Those are the same people being called in on tech right now. It's one of the reasons why you're also going to see culturally the tech sector shift to something that much more resembles the tactics and underhanded stuff that you've seen traditionally in those industries. Because once you're big and you have that liability, nothing is something that you won't be willing to stoop to in order to avoid that and discharge it to say, oh, it's personal responsibility. You're going to see the same thing happen that you've saw happen in the other sectors of the last 2 decades.
Okay, next up is an ex-Twitter staffer reveals herself as the whistleblower who testified to the January 6th committee about Twitter's failure to curb Trump, and now doing an exclusive interview with the Washington Post. From Reuters, France plans to impose a €3 minimum delivery fee for online book orders of less than €35 to help independent bookstores compete against big online booksellers.
This is something France does. They have centralized culture. They've done that for the last 400 years. They publicly elect their CEOs. They do culture in a weird state-sponsored way, and it's been that way for a very long time.
And what else here? Some civil rights groups, according to the Washington Post, say that they have seen little action from Meta, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube to bolster election policies ahead of the 2022 U.S. midterms.
Just a quick little thing. In the old markets for television, you have like these local TV stations all across the USA and other countries as well. Historically, the two main sponsors economically for keeping those things online was car dealerships that would pay up about 40-50% of the thing. So, buy now from Famous Dave's used cars. So do you ever wonder essentially why you see lots of, oil themed articles and lots of things about car crashes and stuff? That's because they're sponsors that they're doing things with. The other group that paid for about the other 40-50% of the station's revenue would be the election season. They would literally make it all within a period of about 2 or 3 months of mudslinging of candidates like blasting each other, saying so and so supports this. Do you want to vote for someone that did this? Yeah, that whole shit that paid for the local media ads. Now, when those TV stations all got essentially like not shut down but consolidated into centralized groups like Sinclair, etc., it left open a gap for new competitors in this market. That's basically taking people's time that would have been watching television. Young people don't vote, but old people are all the boomers are still watching old TV. Those people are all on Facebook right now. So those same market things, those same eyeballs are now going for saying, hey, can we spend money on Facebook advertising? That same market demographic is something that why would they want to diminish a market demographic that's about to load them up with a bunch of cash? It's not just something that happens a one-time thing. It's a seasonal one. If they clamp down on election spending policies and how what kind of tricks you can do, etc., think of that as a deduction from revenue. And when you tell them, yes, you've got a lot of congressional heat. Yes, you're looking at all this stuff, but Wall Street doesn't like the fact that you might have to be forced to sell off your Instagram WhatsApp thing for anti-competitive reasons, or you might have a reduction in the number of users because there's only so many people that live in these countries and you've oversold them by 3 times to your advertisers. There's a limit to how much farther your revenue can go. So at that point, when you have to decide between, well, this might make us politically a little more exposed, but hey, the people that do get elected, they get elected because of our platform, so we can lean on them later for that, versus, oh no, we might say, let's be all ethical about this, but we might miss our quarterly revenue targets. Yeah, they've never shown a backbone on this ever, and I don't expect them to do this. So I think articles like this are a little bit asking the wrong questions. They should be asking how many congressional candidates got elected because of Facebook, and how many of them have financially either given or received money from the company while they're still in charge of regulating them. Until you see groups saying we will not do any financial transactions with a platform we're in charge with regulating, you're not going to see any budging on this issue whatsoever. It's mostly just essentially puppet shows to keep us entertained.
And those that do or are willing to lose to those who are willing to cut corners. So I think that's why you don't see those other players, because they get outcompeted and leave the market. So all you get is this kind of cutthroat attitude.
Okay. India proposes a legal framework to regulate communication services like WhatsApp and Signal, but includes things like email and Gmail and what have you, including encrypted apps like WhatsApp and Signal.
Good luck with that.
And apparently, the legal framework, some people are tweeting saying that, well, for example, Proton Mail, who tries to sell privacy, says today we're removing our VPN servers in India to protect the privacy of our community due to India's new surveillance law, as they're calling it, because that's essentially what it seems to be. So, who else made an interesting point on this? It says the government has proposed a law. Where is it? The draft bill is giving. No, where is it? Where is it? They're saying that it looks like Gmail, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, and others, and their users are going to have to do some paperwork to comply with this, because in its present form, they will all need licenses that will have to identify users with a verifiable ID. Which
I'm sure this will never come into trouble if the anytime wants to politically protest.
Yeah, well, I mean, not only are they going to require communication apps to have verified users, which, by the way, some tech bro told us a year ago that this was going to happen and that India would likely.
He was selling some surveillance software for such things.
No. No, but I remember claiming that they're going to start requiring IDs before long, and then Nicholas came in, and we all got a lot of interesting additional context on the whole ID thing. But I still think this is true, that just like Korea has done for a very long time, since 2006 or what, the apps are going to have to have verifiable IDs of users. And then the question is, what about the encryption? And this is where the India one is ahead of the curve in somewhat demanding they have a backdoor into all of the encrypted communications. They don't want to allow truly private communications happening between people in India. And if you don't like that, like Proton wants to enable you to have that. And so they're saying, no, no, you can't be
So,
here. You're going to have to
so
go
a
out.
really unusual perspective take on this with things. This you will not hear this view very often. I'd actually say this could actually be a huge win for net transparency for everyone, and but in a very unexpected way. It's going to sound like I'm supporting this, but I'm actually kind of going. I am, but in a very bizarre way. When you see the database leaks with China, when they say, "Hey, look, we had everyone's private information. We have it for billions of citizens. Oh wait, our population counts are off." And they lose a Shanghai police server admin key because someone uploads it the wrong to uploads it to a GitHub account, and oops, essentially we left the front door unlocked. Um, and then all of a sudden, a nation state has essentially a lot of their population counts targeted and all these other parts. That's something that will happen whenever you have any accumulated database. And because governments love to accumulate data, weirdly, here's what's going to happen when they require those backdoors for encrypted apps, that means they're going to have to store that data somewhere. All of essentially the backdoors they have for all of people's private communications goes into one giant database eventually. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. The question isn't if, but when that database will leak. And then all of a sudden, everyone sees everyone else's communications simultaneously. The conversation will shift very quickly after that because all of a sudden it's not a context about whether or not the government is seeing something to stop some terrorist or some child people or some pornography thing or some the one that has a political dissent. It's going to be whether or not every other person has every communication of every other person simultaneously. And it's going to happen very quickly and very suddenly. And it's going to be very unexpected. Everyone's going to say, no one could have possibly seen this happening. There'll be inquests and all these other things. But that's the sort of thing that's actually being decided here. It's just the groups at the table on either side don't realize that's what's being negotiated here. I'm really curious to see how this is going to turn out.
Hey, wait. So we're talking. We were actually talking about this before. Is like to like mess back, right, in the privacy arena. Just get a few devices and like have a conversation on one, and then jump to another channel. So you're on Signal, then Telegram, then some other thing, then some other profile. So you're constantly sending out the same conversation through a bunch of different channels, thereby at least making it a little harder for them to put all that
Okay,
together.
all right. Play this forward. We've got more in AI now. Do you know what that kind of thing's on else? Just play through a few scenarios. We've got deep fake, so any particular person can take on full appearance from everything from visual to all the signatures of some person. So you can't even verify that a single account, even if you have full visibility onto it's actually accurate. You have the ability to send out arbitrary creative information. You're saying something with stable diffusion for like visual media, but we already have GPT-3 for textual. So you could have an infinite conversation between an infinite number of people and none of it being real. And it's a single afternoon with the programmer to rig up that program. They open source it, and now millions of people can run the same thing, just polluting a data network with all these fake conversations. Not because they actually need to talk to each other, just because it gives a plausible reason to put data between a large number of and endpoints. What
Yeah,
that also enables.
but then you do the reverse AI, and then you use the AI to track those patterns, and then you can find out and filter out that noise and get back to the real ones, dude. It's gonna be like a back and forth, just like in the Google SEOs, right? Like the SEOs go
Right,
back
yeah.
and forth. It's gonna be pretty cool to see the AI battles back and forth around this.
Well, so here's what becomes very strange about that is right now we've just crossed a threshold recently. There's something hilarious called the dead internet theory. I strongly recommend people looking it up. It's hilarious. Where the idea is the internet actually died 4 or 5 years ago and it was taken over by bots and everything we see isn't actually made by any people anymore. It's of course false, but it's hilarious because it rings true in a lot of different aspects. There's something that's related to with the idea that how much of the internet is bots and how much is people in many ways, if you actually look at the actual metrics, the stuff that's actually done for advertisers, et cetera, the amount of data transmission packets, et cetera, under many services, we crossed the 50% threshold where it's more for bots than it is for people a while ago. Now, what's really interesting about this is that under this scenario, you end up having not 50% bots and people, but this is like 99% bots as the norm, just because human data is being smuggled in between all the fake information, just because that's essentially how basic communications work, and that's normal. There are some weird scenarios in the near future. One more thing just to throw out there is that same thing for the is AIs that can generate new forms of communication and also discern them. We also have to do that with compression. Now, here's one of the biggest things. Whenever you saw like Silicon Valley, the TV show, they have like all these Pied Piper adventures and stuff. What great TV show! Strongly recommend looking at. It's a really good look at Silicon Valley. But one of the things that's hilarious is when they're doing technical consulting on that, they said, "What are all the different technologies we want to cover in the show? Well, we want to do like Internet of Things. We want to do like video conferencing. We want to have like all this like cool thing with VR." And they asked technical consultants, "What is the one technology that we can have to allow our little fictional startup to do all of these?" And they said, "There's only one that you could really do it with: compression." If you can make a breakthrough, general case breakthrough with general case compression that allows you to get more data in a smaller form factor, that is one of the few technologies that powers every other thing. Well, guess what? The newest generation of AI algorithms in today, in real life, not the fictional TV show, but in real life, we are having those breakthroughs happening right now in artificial intelligence that allows us to do general case compression. That is huge because that's something you re-architect everything else for. Now, here's why that matters when we bring it to the encryption debate. You're going to be able to smuggle data in much, much smaller packages. When you are trying to mask signature data for signal to noise ratio, is what's called, the smaller the amount of signal that you have to communicate, the smaller the data packets, the more they can blend in with the background noise, the more efficient you can actually move information around. When we have a scenario in the future where there's going to be massive amounts of synthetic noise that are just being generated as normal to soak up all the extra compute power, the extra bandwidth, the extra government surveillance, etc., what you're going to end up having on the other side is the ability to put extraordinary large packets of very complex information, everything from 3D models, visual communications, text, entire like synthetic intelligences that can do all sorts of cool things from medical, etc. Those are going to be able to fit in such tiny, tiny packages that you only need a very small amount of that to move around. As an example of how crazy this is, the stable diffusion algorithm, which I keep bringing up multiple times, so people could strongly look into this. It's related to Dolly and stuff from a few months ago, but open source. The entire visual corpus of the entire internet was downloaded into a single database, and then they compressed it with this into 4.2 gigabytes that can sit on a single computer that can recreate any visual image known to man with a 4 kilobyte instruction. That is huge. In a few months, they say they can get down to 100 megabytes. 100 megabytes for every visual image that has ever been created by mankind that has been exposed to the internet. That's every artist, every drawing, every photograph, etc.
Just
All
one
you need
thing,
is a 4 kilobyte.
humankind, humankind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
exactly.
Chris,
Because
an
the AI is going to have.
approximation
I was also
of
for other thing, but the key part I say is compression, being able to essentially noise to signal ratio, and the number of actors and where they can communicate to each other. All of these are factors that are not on the roadmaps. They're not even in the discussions here, but they will become dominant trends in the very near future, and you're going to see a lot of that happen with these interactions. And I'm very excited to see this era because we haven't had this map properly. It's going to be a wild west again, and very
What's
excited
Yeah,
for
but
it.
interesting, and getting
what
back to
happens
the
when you?
original conversation, was that you don't forget, they did this with BlackBerry going back in 2010. And I don't know if everybody knows, but they eventually did get a backdoor into the BlackBerry encrypted communications. India did. So I suspect this is something that's going to be expanded on by other governments. You know, India did this already. They're going to continue doing it again with every encrypted communication.
No, but this is ridiculously massive. What Chris is talking about, right, dude? That's just on images. Imagine as they start to apply that knowledge on all other types of things, and then it goes into corporates, and then you start to be able to drop that the amount of sectors this will also spread out into that tech is pretty wild. And the pace of innovation is coming so fast. And then what's after that? And then what's after that? It's just coming at us so much faster and faster, faster. It's incredible.
Even art is keeping up because you have a program like the one that some of you may have seen in the UK called The Capture. It's just one aspect of this whole phenomenon and technology that is very similar to the Star Trek thing. The Capture captures um, politicians on TV and very, very quickly transfers a real image to a fake image. So, therefore, fake news and fake interviews are broadcast rather than a real thing. So there's that scenario where you're running between the studio where the live camera is going and the recording room where it's being broadcast to see that it's actually different. And the idea that you could use technology to do facial recognitions interchangeably is scary. But it's happening on TV in a fictional thing, so it probably means it's possible out there somewhere.
One last thing I need to throw in here, just this real quick, because people, this is an applied thing. It's not just watch the headlines. You can do this now. If you go look up Stable Diffusion, I've got friends running this right now. What you can actually do is you can take any image and have it running on your local GPU, have it run overnight, and you can generate 10,000 variations of it by the time you wake up the next morning. Those 10,000 variations, each one can be drawn by a different artist from a different time period in history. So imagine a version of the moon landings, where you say, okay, here's a picture of the moon landing. Now I want to have it rendered from every single camera type that's ever been done. I want to do as every single art style that's ever been done. And now I want to post all of these automatically at different places around the internet. You complete that loop, and if you don't have watermarking on that, which the original ones actually by default configurations do, but that's a pretty easy thing to remove if you want to. What's going to be interesting is that in the near future, the Internet Archive and other things for the pre-2022 time period are going to be very valuable, just because we knew that there was a limited amount of artificial intelligence running around putting data out there. Afterwards, the quantity scale up of this is going to be so many, it's going to be ratios that are unfathomable to us right now. From the content generation, or you have entire economies built on content. When you amplify that by 1,000 times and you give that to each and every person, and then you say this is only going to increase by 10x every few months, we do not have the economic models for this right now. It is going to completely turn things upside down. And it's exciting, and if you can be a part of that right now and get to see what's going to happening.
Well, there
I
was
just
one
wouldn't
Do
want
do
you
they
to
artist
miss
have
it.
that actually, just quickly, there was one artist who is showing up in all these stable diffusion
Greg
queries.
Bertowski.
Yeah, yeah. Now that there's more art generated by him that he says is not his art, but yet all these AI are then going and scouring the internet and saying, "Oh, look, there's even more art from this guy." So it's an interesting snowball effect of popularity meets AI. Very unpredictable.
He's made
where,
30
where they at
pieces, but the
where they at on the
spinoff, there's
video?
10,000 of them.
Where they at on the videos, dude? Like especially with Stable Diffusion, where are they at on the
Oh, they're
videos?
doing it one frame
They're
at a
doing
time. I've seen some people do it one frame at a
But
time. It's
but
really cool and really
five
but
trippy.
five
It looks like Deep Dream a little bit.
but is
five
Stable
seconds
Diffusion able to
worth.
like compress the videos down to do the
Yes,
image down to that level too? You do
it'll
wait, so
work.
we could go compress the videos down to
Yes,
that level with so we could go sit there, take all the YouTube videos, especially the live one,
yes,
go compress it down in there, and then start running AI at that level down in there too.
yes,
Hang on,
yes.
Chris. You're making claims about compression that I think are going a bit too far. There's
No,
very simple, as you know, fundamental
this
limits
is
on
literally something I spent 4 years of
compressibility
my life
without.
studying. It was what I got.
Sure,
I've spent
sure,
more
sure.
time on
But you
compression
can't
than any other
choose.
subject.
You can't choose what you're getting to the extent that you perhaps are suggesting. You're losing a
Lossy
lot of
compression. It's
information.
lossy.
Very, very lossy. Very, very
Yeah,
lossy.
Uh,
yeah, it's very
A, a,
lossy. Scales with the
a,
network.
a DALI 2 output, for example, is, if you look at it, it's amazing, and I use it a lot for fun, but it's amazingly flawed as well. You really need Photoshop afterwards to get rid of the ridiculous emissions, and etc. So it is
temporary
highly, highly,
limitations.
highly,
These
highly lossy. So we need to not make it think that we can. But if you compress to the levels you're talking about, you're not even going to recognize a blind test of
No,
it.
Oh
Will
no,
no
be to
no
it's
that
recognize
this
what
surprising
is
how
YouTube
well it
you're going to
works.
semantic compression. This is the thing
Surprising.
that's bizarre.
This
You
is
get
all
I
in the
get the principles,
process. Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I get the principles, but you're ignoring the side channel. You're having to send so much information you've
Oh
already
no
had
no
to
no! The
share.
side channel is the thing. You get about you get so the thing that's important about this is you're storing a pre-compiled dictionary ahead of time. The current model
I
for
understand.
Stable Diffusion is 4.2 gigabytes. The Dolly one I think is like 100 gigabytes. However, the 4.2 can run locally. Now the key part is you need to both have a copy of that. That's a standardized version. Now currently 4.2 is a little bit large. 100 megabytes that they say they're going to be able to hit in the next few months, and there's no reason to think that they can't. Um, if you can hit 100 megabytes, that's at the level you can start baking into the chips themselves. Rather than having this as something that essentially you download as a model, it's something that is built in mass produced quantities. In the same
Sure.
way that we do these days when you look at the bill of materials for an iPhone, you'll actually see that a good amount that the money they spend on it, I think is like 6% is actually for a chip that's sole job is to do decompression and compression algorithms for essentially MPEG and streaming video. That it's a dedicated chip that has a bunch of predefined algorithms, but also predefined data sets just to making that process as easier. So the business model is
Yeah, no,
already there for everyone to start with.
I get it'll hit some embeddability thresholds. It'll be amazing, but you have to admit that a given output image could have had one of an increasing number of possible inputs. And as your
Oh, it
compression
will have
ratio goes
10
up,
million variations. When you see
no,
like,
not
but what's
variations on
crazy
the
about it
output.
is
No, no,
it's
hang on. Not variations on the output. You give me an image that you say you've compressed, my input. But I will tell you that there could be 100 million different inputs that would give you that same image. It has to work that way because of simple information theory. So this is not
Uh,
a reliable
well,
compression
no, no, no.
where you can go from the output to one input. It's a many, 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 many to one. It has to
it's
be
a
just because of
it's
entropy.
a lossy algorithm, but the thing is that the ability to do semantic compression is very different from doing like, oh, we've got a pixel density. That's how we're used to thinking about compression of, oh, it looks like a potato afterwards. Which a little bit what's happening here is actually a lot stranger. In the very near future, what's going to happen is when you compress an image too far, what'll happen is it's not whether or not essentially it's the dog that's staring at you with a cute expression of its face. If it's semantically compressed it too far, then its dog collar shape might change. It might have an ears that's a little bit longer. You might have the text on the wall change to be a different language because they compressed it from 4 kilobytes to 2 kilobytes. However, it will still be a reconstruction of a dog image. It just changed what was inside of it. What this means is that our images, our visual record of information, is going to become very recognizable, but weirdly it's going to start hallucinating things that don't actually exist. So it's going to become something much more like fallible like human memory. That is going to have very strange implications for how we relate to technology if this starts becoming a bedrock thing of what we build off of. It's going to be very different in the near future.
What are the
Indeed,
But
legal
it's
that's
going.
not really
implications?
compression. What you're talking about is not really compression. You're transforming something into something like an image into the description of that image
A
in
latent
text,
space.
and then that. And because of that, what happens is, yeah, you're right. You're going to get something completely different than what you input. Maybe it's similar, maybe it's not. It's all about the how the AI is going to recognize the content of your words. So that's really not. I would be, not be. I will not consider that to be a kind of compression. It's more of like a, collecting information about an image in text, which is extremely, expensive if you wanna describe it very well. It's just like lossy compression. You have to, if you compress it very too much, it's gonna become unrecognizable. And if you don't have enough details, then you're missing the point. It's I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptic of how this is going to play out in the future.
No, no, I see it, dude. I see. Okay, here's how it plays out. It's actually going to be great, right? So right now, everybody uses like Facetune or something like that to polish their image or something like that. I see what it's doing. So if you compress it down to like a ridiculous thing, but if the AI is really good enough to reconstruct it and make you look even better. And so what if you have a little bit of an
Yep.
adjusted nose or a little adjusted, everybody photoshops this shit anyway, right? So basically, everybody's going to get prettier and nicer, and you basically slam down the compression to store it, and then when you recall it, then you reconstruct it using AI. That's pretty freaking cool, right? And that's a new way. It's not really compression. It is compression, but it's reconstruction. That's very
It's
interesting.
close enough. Reconstruction is a much more accurate description, but it does do most of the things that we have with lossy compression. Not lossless, but lossy.
It's
We're
So
already having problems with the authenticity of a lot of the content that we are providing. A lot of people saying, this is not authentic because it's been retouched, or there's a filter that has been applied, and all sort of stuff. This is going to even escalate this problem even further. It's going to be like, this is it has nothing to do with the person who came in. Like a person came came in the original picture, and now this picture comes out, and you really cannot, tell if this is the same guy in the original image, because this is the computer rendition of what the
Yeah,
description was.
but we're
So
already
Good
doing
luck
that.
proving provenance. Good luck with court evidence. I mean, this
Yeah,
is
but we're
going
already
to
doing
be
it.
completely crazy.
yeah,
Like we're already doing it. That's what everybody does anyway. They go in and they Photoshop and they use those little apps and they make themselves look a little bit better. So this is just going to be more efficient at doing that. You just knock out the amount of time it takes to do that. Let's just
Real
everybody.
so
time age changing. Real time VFX on your camera phone better than a Hollywood studio. Real time being able to recast age ranges, facial expressions, deep fakes that run on local devices. We're currently thinking about this as something that requires technical skill or economic access or the blessing of some tech company or government. When you have this baked in at the chip level on cheap commodity hardware that everyone has, it completely changes so many things. It gets bizarre and strange really
yeah,
quick.
exactly.
can
If you
can
don't
I
mind, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Tina.
yeah, I just want to point out something. I'm just in my head. I've spent a lot of time talking to people about blockchains and Web3 and attribution and recognizing, originals, or at least attributing. So it's kind of funny that this is almost I want to say, the other side of the spectrum in
Sure.
terms of interpretation versus being able to. And Maher, you were saying it, being able to actually say this is the exact one because it's going to be a copy of a copy of a copy or an interpretation of a copy. Does that make sense?
Um, I would like to say,
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
yeah, in a way, yes. And I would say because the promotion of this, the text to image, is so huge, and if you give a try the first time, you're feel, oh, so it's amazing. It really just transcribed my description into an image that if I draw it maybe in a day or two, but I think that gives us false expectation. That means right now it can do a lot of it replaces a lot of tedious things we do in the Photoshop.
Yeah.
But just like Ben
What's that
said,
noise?
actually we have problem to anchor the result we want. So if you get a promising result, like you say a character, and then you want to extend that to an IP or something, you need to fix with that image. But right now, all the text to image AI can't get us this. So, but Ben, I think it's in the process. In the future, there will be many UX. Just right now in DALL-E 2, there is a imprinting and outprinting features. If you have a fixed image, actually you can create it out the background around the original image, and that is pretty handy. And you use it with our text. So, I mean, right now it's still only for those experts who can do with like Photoshop or video editing. You can make it to a video if you know how to make an image frame to frame than to the video. So right now it's not like everybody can be an expert artist in overnight. So I think both Chris and Ben, you all got a great points here, but I think we have to wait the AI, those algorithm, and those who develop with those algorithm to give us better user interface, and that is do really if you we because right now just like a phrase, if even I right now I'm saying like Tyler on the coconut beach and getting a sunshine with this cocktail. Just this phrase, everybody has different image, I believe. So right now, AI is the same situation. And then if I choose one from the outcomes and I want to extend that image to other styles, yes, possible. But if I want to use this character to do like IP, if I want to produce the product from this, it's not in this, not now, not right now. So I think we have to adjust our expectation right now. But I believe in the future it's very quick. Chris gave me a lot of amazing information, and this progress, just like within a month or 2 months, it's or the result is already like next generation thing. So we're seeing very promising, at least text to AI. Even in China, actually, last time when we talk about China's AI won't let you. Won't let you have outcome of Tiananmen Square, but actually under Baidu they have all kinds of AI. Like if you give a title, it will give a full article, and you can tweak. You can tweak all those index to how long and how and the strong how the strength of it, and they have all others like and I mean the in China they have different approach to this. Um, but most of you don't understand Chinese, so you cannot understand how they manage this thing. But I will say, uh, we there's another aspect I think we should observe as well. So we're seeing more and more like this AI generated thing, not only image. So uh, give it the time, okay?
Yeah, but it also it's going to help designers. At the end of the day, this is like the designers are going to have a field day with this AI, right? So like,
Yes,
okay,
yes, but I think that the wrong expectation right now is that not everyone can be a artist
oh, of course
overnight.
not,
Just
of
like
course not. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the artists are going to have
the
such a
original promotion makes it sound like that.
But it's
So
not. It's
it's not. It's not.
in practicality, the artists are going to be able to like totally have an advantage over everybody else because they're artists. So they're going to know what the end result is going to be. At the end of the day, that's what matters is the end result, the end product. But so you're just going to have a new tool set to basically do some cool stuff, and the end result, the artist's eye is, and then the tools that they're going to use, right? And then also being able to go into Photoshop and trigger a few functions, and then use the AI to reconstruct from that, right? That's something that's a massive advantage for the designers, right? But the
Yeah, but
main
better.
thing,
But yes, yeah, that's now. But I believe the AI, this algorithm, oh, the pace they advanced. It's just well, someday we will say they are the winner. We have to.
the AI is not going to replace the designers and the artists. I know people are afraid of that, but it's really not. It's just going to allow a great tool to enhance those things. And I don't know why it's being marketed as like it's going to make all these. No, it's going to actually create explosions of jobs all over the place, and
it
all
it
to
if you're
you.
actually trying to create jobs, the problem is that a lot of people that pay for artwork, they just want the cheapest one possible. This is like the kind of people that aren't looking for the next Da Vinci. They want they want like the word, like the where you pay like a $5 type kind of thing, or I want to pay like $20 and I just need a basic picture of a dog for my new ad campaign type kind of thing. Those types of work will vanish from this.
Yeah,
It's not about whether or
exactly.
not essentially that the
Yeah, I
super
agree.
artistic, here's the thing, I spent 20 years of my life on type of artwork. It's the commercial artwork. And the thing is that economically that does provide, I'm making up numbers here, 80-90% of revenue for many artists. So that part is very much in danger. The upper side of it, maybe that'll be they're different, maybe they'll be different, but the commercial side from the capitalist thing that you require saying we need to essentially you have to generate artwork of commercial value in order to essentially pay for your food on the table. That part is very much in question. France's model about paying for artists from the state might be more interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of other ways of potentially handling that, but there's a lot of disruption incoming for artists that do it for commercial reasons.
I would like to provide example. My friend, he's a Chinese overseas, but
Okay,
he's
last
writing
comment.
a novel and he's doing
BB,
this project. Huh? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I'm
I'm
introducing a
just
new
saying he's doing the project. Using
BB. You have to learn how to follow social cues.
okay, thank.
I'm just going to make a quick announcement that this is the last comment of this thread before we go to the next headline. Go ahead.
I'm just saying my friend. She's writing a novel and he decided to use Dali totally for his novels illustration. And he's a tech guy, so that's how he shows how this AI can replace this kind of job, just like Chris said.
All right. So there's a whole bunch of tweets to go through. The first is from BB from CNBC. Google CEO Sundar Pichai tells Googlers at an all hands meeting not to equate fun with money in a heated all hands meeting. He expressed some annoyance at this week's all hands meeting as he sought to clarify and defend cost cuts and address employee concerns. Binance creates a global. David found this one. Uh, Binance creates a global advisory board to tackle regulatory challenges. And
I'm sorry, Tyler. Did that article that you just read about Google actually say that the CEO is unhappy with the fact that, or he told people not to equate money with fun, and then is unhappy with some of the demands of his employees?
I didn't. There was no
Okay.
mention of the second part of that.
Okay. No, I
Google.
guess my brain immediately went,
So
every
here's
tech
more
company for 20 years has been putting foosball tables and basketball hoops in their offices
The sushi
and
spot.
making work supposed to be this fun place to go, and now all of a sudden money is not okay. I find it interesting.
Yeah, but the
here's the
headline's a little out of context, right? So
here's the
it
context.
said,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Read it.
It
Yeah.
says Google's finance head told employees to temper their expectations for holiday parties. And he expressed some annoyance. He says, I remember when Google was small and scrappy, he said. We shouldn't always equate fun with money. So what he's getting them
We
to
shouldn't equate
understand,
Google with money is increasingly what's being seen here.
Oh my God.
well, it says Pichai was asked in a question that was highly rated by staffers on Google's internal system why the company is nickel and diming employees by slashing travel and swag budgets at a time when Google has record profits and huge cash reserves. And he said his response was, "How do I say it? Look, I hope all of you are reading the news externally. The fact that we are being a bit more responsible through one of the toughest macroeconomic conditions underway in the past decade. I think it's important that as a company we pull together to get through moments like this." And
If they want
but
responsible people, they get the people to go into lawyers or into banking. They said, no, come into Silicon Valley. We have all the crazy foosball tables. You don't have to dress up. You can wear whatever you want, and we're all chill here. We work around the clock. It's gonna get you got the massage. They have they have 5 sushi bars there, the five different spas.
he
Yeah,
said,
but Chris, I like that's completely like you've taken two or three data points from decades apart and created a thesis on the basis of this article. This
Oh
is
no,
a
no, no.
this is the CEO. This is the
This is
CEO.
internal versus external. The thing is, people still have the perception of Google from that externally to the
But
company.
but
Internally,
it's
I've been to the campus. It's mostly cubicles, as far as I can see. There's a small little cluster in the
yeah,
center
I
that
mean,
actually
like,
happen to
but
be
Google is
MDs.
like a large company, right? This is not a startup anymore. But every large company CEO, I can empathize with the fact that, you're basically, I don't know what the average salary of a Google employee is, but it's probably
300 or 400
way
grand
higher
starting.
than the average like Fortune 500 company, right? So
They
it's got
rely on
like
contractors to artificially depress the wages quite a bit. So what they'll do is they'll outsource the data training to third world countries. They'll also have contractors. They abuse that a lot, and they'll pay them 100 grand or 120, and they say technically you don't work for Google, but you can, but you don't. But then the Google capital G employees will make 300 or 400 grand and going on up, which looks
right. So
great
these,
on your
but
labor
these
ratios.
employees, this is a all hands, uh, like an employee workshop, like a town hall, right? And they're coming in there and they're working this through. So these are highly paid employees, right? Pretty
well,
guarantee it. They're pretty highly
here,
paid, right?
here's the bigger
And
important
They
picture here,
were.
which is their question is valid, which is there seems to be some incongruence between or the fact that Google's this incredible company and that why is one of the world's richest companies seemingly nickel and diming and cutting travel budgets. Because, by the way, as Cal will know, or anyone who's ever worked at a big corporate, that's one way to piss off the team is just cut travel budgets, right? They're particularly sensitive to that issue because it's all of a sudden now they're not able to go to the conference they like going to every year, and you're going to get some moaning and groaning as a reaction, and he's getting this question at the town hall as a reaction. And it's like, why do we have to cut travel when we're so huge? We're Google after all. Now, his response, I think, is touching on a really important point, which is the Fed just raised, what was it, yesterday, 75 basis points, and more importantly, adjusted their forward looking sentiment to indicate that they expect that they'll have to do that. They'll continue to raise another 1.5%. If that
60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and do not
hold
have
on, I got to
long-term
finish this
security.
point real quick. If that happens, many economically savvy people project that will lead potentially to an economic collapse, the likes
So
of which we haven't seen since the Great Depression.
it's being responsible. He's being responsible. The CEO is being
Correct. Correct. He's being very adult in pre-anticipating
He should
one
say,
of the
grow
biggest.
up.
Right, exactly. He should say, "Listen, I understand you're a coder and not an economist, but we might be on the brink of the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression.
exactly,
So
exactly.
we that's. I mean, if
And
he
rather
was
than having you guys working on world-saving problems on energy systems or things that could allow you to essentially create local social community things with essentially community-driven data ecosystems, etc., we had you guys working for ad tech companies to figuring out how corporations can maximize their returns and make those Gini coefficients go through the roof on wealth concentration. So instead, you guys might be forced to actually work on useful problems because you'll be working with other companies, not here because we're an ad tech company. That's the actual conversation that's going to happen about 12 months from now if those economic things actually happen, and those coders should grow up a bit because they're
his
working
other
they're
his
working
other
in a very
answer could
artificial system.
another potential answer that I think would have really touched the nerve and maybe in a better place is to say, listen, we have frozen hiring, and we could actually lay off people to prepare for what we think is this major, economic event. But rather than lay off people, we're going to restrict, budgets of travel budgets, food budgets, whatever. And so, you let us know, which do you prefer? Do you prefer that we lay off another 5-10% of people and keep the travel budgets, or should we just restrict the travel budgets?
And if there's a good
So
labor movement at Google, they'll say, yes, let's do that. Let's start with management and we'll start laying them off first. And then it becomes very comical headlines for the next 6 months.
yeah,
You
If
know,
I may,
it's just being responsible. Like what Google employees and the rest of the world should do is start to think. Wait a second. If big old Google is starting to hunker down and lock things up right now, then maybe we should start paying attention to why. I don't know. Like Bill Gates,
Google,
the
Netflix,
number.
Facebook,
can
the
I,
whole sector.
you
Well, hold
guys,
on, but like when Bill Gates
can I
became
get
number
a word in
one,
for a
the number.
second?
Yeah, almost done. Let me finish.
Yep.
Bill Gates became the number one owner of
Tina,
farmland. Then it's important, right, for us to start paying attention to these signals, right? Not to criticize them because there's stuff coming. They're being responsible.
Okay.
Tina,
Thanks, baby. I mean, Cheryl, I don't know why I keep doing that. I'm so sorry. Um,
I do.
no, it's not. I'm staring at BB's thing,
Need
and I
coffee. You need coffee.
probably a lot of it. Okay, so my point being that I want to make is what I'd rather hear and what I don't like hearing, because I've said this too many times, this short-term thinking of laying off employees, hiring employees, and what Chris's point about contractors. And I totally get everything you guys are saying. I agree 1000% that he is being responsible and he is doing exactly what any company needs to do in times where they're forecasting a downturn. What I'd love to see is, instead of the carrot and the stick, I would love for him, anyone in a leadership position in a company, to say, here's what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're trying to educate you because we think you should also be doing that, because we pay you and we don't want to lay you off, and we don't want to see the bad things happen or the negative things happen to companies. Instead of this sort of like, you get a party or you don't get a party. I mean, I would really, really rather that we hear about these companies really investing in their employees the way that they say they do, and educating them about, like, here's what we're doing, how we're doing it, percentage wise, whatever, in whatever form that they can, so that their employees maybe learn something from this, as opposed to this adversarial relationship that we're constantly seeing in the press. Thank you.
Hey
so Chris,
Tyler,
yeah,
can I just make two quick points on this? One is
can,
a while ago, probably during the pandemic, but not just because of the pandemic. Microsoft, I think, said they were going to cut back corporate travel because they were one of the biggest users of corporate travel, and corporate travel apparently adds to CO2 in the environment. You know, all the air travel. So there's been some pressure on large companies to cut back corporate travel anyway for because of climate change is number one. But I would say, but your other comment, that's really what I wanted to say, that if somebody is saying that these rate hikes are going to lead to something akin to the Great Depression with a D, that is hyperbole. It probably will lead to a recession. I have no doubt about that. It might look like 82. It might look a little bit like '08. It might look in '08, you can argue was pretty deep because of housing. I don't even know if that would get that bad, but it's not going to be a depression. And I'm always very upset when people always say we're going to have another depression. Part of the reason we had a depression in the 1930s is we didn't have the social safety net programs that we have now. Okay, we didn't have Social Security, we didn't have the FDIC, we didn't have SIPC, we didn't have all of the mechanisms that we had a complete bank collapse. Notice that we would have had a bank collapse in 2008 if it wasn't for the FDIC. So 2008 was proof that the circuit breakers that were put in as a result of the Great Depression kind of work. So I don't think we'll ever get that bad again. And it's almost like a scare tactic, hyperbole, to suggest that these rate hikes. I mean, rates are still, by the way, historic levels, not high. I mean, I remember when you could go back in the '70s and look where interest rates were. We're nowhere near that, and we didn't get to a Great Depression. We didn't have a Great Depression in the '70s. We just had a very stagnant economy. So, and I'll leave it there.
okay.
just for
So the
context, right? Tyler, just very
the
fast.
here this. comment from the piece, I think, nicely summarizes it.
Mhm.
One question that was asked at the meeting was uh, why, where is it? Why did Google go from rapidly hiring and spending to equally aggressive cost saving? And
Because
I think,
MBAs are running the company.
well, and more importantly, because they went from COVID, where, for example, Amazon nearly doubled its factory footprint in a year in what it had done in the previous 15
That's
years.
insane. That's physical. Physical scales way harder than the digital. Digital
Yes,
software is
but
what fueled all the tech industry. Hardware is and physical layout, physical
right,
infrastructure. That's so much hard to do.
but Google as well went through one of the fastest growth periods during COVID because people were using Google products more than ever, and it was incredible, unprecedented, rapid hiring and spending and whatever. And then coming out of COVID into where we are now, we're going exactly in the opposite direction, rather, and that should be explained to the person who asked that question so that they understand macroeconomics because that's not their field of study. And I think there's a really simple way to do that. That should have been mentioned. That somebody should have brought a chart to this meeting so that people could see what's uh, happening and
Work from
anticipated.
home and COVID market bubble.
Just for
Yep.
context, right? I have a Google technologist friend who visit Tokyo, flew in on a business class, stay in Ritz-Carlton Hotel, eating Kobe beef on the tap. So I think cutting back a little is not going to hurt them much. They are living in luxury.
Okay, so the next tweet is Binance creates the global advisory board to tackle regulatory challenges. Okay,
Please don't
Lewis.
sue us. We want to operate. We want to have all the money. Please don't tax us. Please don't regulate us. And if you
Well,
do,
exactly.
regulate other harder groups for other
What
groups harder.
what a coincidence that they've been playing on the fringe of
Don't throw us into jail.
right. And now that the governments are making their frameworks, the U.S. just came out with their framework for how they're going to demand everyone play, and now ByteDance is going to have to fall under the regulations and play. And
Tyler, how many senators are on their advisory board?
I don't know.
Because if they didn't have that up front, they're screwed.
Yeah, they got to learn how to play that game.
That's what
Patience.
that's what the finance companies have when they're in danger regulation, 2008
Yeah.
mortgage crisis, etc. Look at all the groups with advisory boards made of former commissioners of different parts of the Fed, different parts of essentially different senators, etc. That's where you play the game long term. It's when you're explicitly going senator by senator, representative by representative, and making sure that the ones that are currently in office, runs with the guys that used to be in office, you have the lobbying firms, etc. If the tech bros and the crypto folk are just now starting to do that, they are way behind. They have a very limited window to do that. If they prepared it ahead of time, maybe they'd have more thing here, but it's going to be a bloodbath here.
Okay. Next up, patients immersed in VR during surgery may need less anesthetics, and
It's real.
minimizing
It's amazing.
minimizing the use of sedatives during operations could shorten hospital stays and reduce the risk of complications.
Opioid
Lewis found
addiction is
one.
one of the biggest issues that can prevent. Also, essentially, burn victims, most painful thing in the world. Look up something called Snow Worlds VR. They have a version of this where they reduce pain from 8 on the scale to essentially down to a 4 with no stimuli aside from you put the VR headset on when you're in throwing snowballs at virtual penguins while you're being changed for burn wounds. And it works. Like you take the headset off and it's screeching extraordinary pain. Put the headset on and then people the pain just drops. This is something very weird when you can directly plug into the visual cortex. VR is able to get low-level limbic responses. This was not expected when I started building VR applications, but something that unexpectedly a lot of the VR applications have medical aspects, PTSD treatment, etc. But yeah, the pain treatment thing, it's real, it's a big deal, and it's going to be essentially commonly available to consumers essentially as we learn more of those brain-computer interactions. It's very exciting.
Hey, Chris, what was that company, or what? How, I'd like to search that.
Look up Snow World VR and then say pain burn ward. You'll I might be getting the name slightly off it, but it's if you search those search terms, it'll come up real quick.
So, I mean, that speaks to just pain management with VR.
Just a
It's
whole.
huge.
That's burn is an acute situation, but for chronic pain management, holy mackerel!
Yeah, it's a big deal. That
But
I'm very
hey,
pessimistic
Chris,
about many sectors in tech. Like like I think metaverse. I think a lot of the stuff essentially is there's a lot of bunk around it, etc. But for this very narrow slice, it is a huge game changer. And there's other things like that within tech where it's very easy to get cynical when you see so much stuff like be overpromise, underdeliver.
Chris,
Wreck some democratic institution, etc. This is one narrow vertical where VR has an enormous amount of social good that can come from it.
right. But the flip side of that coin is that it could also um, mute emotional pain to an equal degree, which would make it a kind of a hardware version of fentanyl.
You can turn it the other direction, turn it into a torture device as well. That's a whole separate thing. I hope the CIA isn't doing things on that. That would be dark and evil.
You could make some amazing soldiers with this, or assassins.
I'm just saying, if
Sure.
people are already, medicating themselves with TikTok, scrolling addiction, wait till you have the VR version of that. It could be a problem. So
Right now, secondhand
Have
smoke is
people
something that we know is social damage. Imagine the dopamine loops when we understand more about that, like, 30, 40 years from now. Right now, a lot of it's like kind of unknown or unpredictable. And it's like, well, how much of this is like something that people has voluntary willpower? How much of this is something where literally you can throw a shows to anyone? You can guarantee that you'll have them having a certain interaction at it later. We're going to have dopamine exposure being something that people actually regulate as some sort of like neural feedback or neurocognitive hazard thing. We're currently too early in that field to really understand it right now, but the tech companies built fortunes off of it, so we know the field exists. What's going to be interesting is that understanding diffuses into the larger population. It's going to get really weird to see how the more extreme versions of that with like VR that can really do like amplifications of this, like how far you can push that. We're going to have some very very strange regulatory infrastructures in the future.
Well, it's like screen time, right? Just put a little dope meter, kind of on the app or on the publisher could do it. Anyways, yeah.
so
It's like
Karam,
don't think and drive or drink and drive, but the dopamine version.
moving on. Karam found this one.
I'm sorry, we need dopamine for regular motivation. If
We
we
just
don't have
moved on,
dopamine, we don't
Katarina. I just clearly
motivate.
said moving on. Thank you. Karam says he's
I'm
from
sorry, Tyler.
Pakistan.
You have guys talking.
So
She's
I'm
got a
going to
point.
read. Yeah. So when I say moving on, I don't care. I'll mute anybody who interrupts when I say moving on. That's a key
I
word
don't
that
think
everybody
Tyler
needs to learn.
distinguishes
Hold,
between
hold on.
male and female. Like,
Well,
I
the
don't.
only two
No,
was females, and guys were interrupting all the.
No, that's okay. I think it's just time. Yeah, we lingered too long.
BB, BB. I don't need any defense in this idiotic charade that she's trying to portray here. So, Karam, who happens to be from Pakistan, found this article from Bloomberg that Pakistan's leader, Prime Minister Sharif, made an urgent appeal for debt relief from rich nations around the world as catastrophic floods are hitting Pakistan. And his quote is, if he doesn't get the debt relief, all hell will break loose, quote unquote. And so, what I would draw your attention to is that we just recently saw Sri Lanka implode as a country. And Pakistan's warning that they too could be next to implode. And that was true even before the floods.
If you fail to make a
And
debt payment, bad things happen to your sovereignty in history and
that
in
too.
present day as well.
But there's also a potential domino effect of when countries they start off with the not so important countries on the chessboard, the pawns, but those can tip over into more important pieces on the board because some countries are dependent on other countries for different parts of their economy and shipping and logistics and whatnot. This is the real calamity that, and the U.S. interest rate plays a role in this. So it isn't in looking only at the U.S.'s economy in a bubble. I mean, in a silo. Yeah, it's a bit much to think that the U.S. is going to fall into a depression by itself. The bigger macroeconomic mosaic, as it's referred to, is that we're going to start seeing smaller countries economically implode, which will have a downward spiral effect, including if Russia does what we expect now, if Putin makes good on his promises, Ukraine and Russia might both be imploding and by the end of next year. To my point, which is this is where Google is trying to play particularly safe, and I do think even within the U.S. exclusively, if the uh, interest rates could the real delicate dance that the Fed is trying to do is raise interest rates to stop inflation but not crash the housing market, which that I don't envy the situation that they are in on that one. That is, I think, is a very fine tightrope that they're on. I would be I'm tempted to bet in terms of allocating my capital on the fact that they will go a bit too far, and we're going to see a bit more, even with the protections that are in place, as Ken correctly points out. I think we will see a bit of a repeat of 2008 with regard to a massive housing bubble popping. In fact, I hope we do in a weird way, because the price of housing is just obscene at the moment.
You're right, but don't forget that Pakistan is also a nuclear nation, and bad things happen. Those nukes can be misplaced or bought on the black market or something. So dangerous.
Two stories that need to get a whole lot more oxygen are the rising wages for people is actually a good thing. It's been a long time. The market, God bless the market for doing what legislators are really, very slow or even just don't want to do. And the other one, middle-aged brain fart here, is free money. The Greenspan, a couple decades of just free money has been a core problem in cultivating the wealth gap. So having something that's a little more rational and having a little bit more on the wages, it's a coming home. It's a huge coming home for the global economy, especially here domestically.
On the
So
international side of things, moving on, Jamal Khashoggi's wife is suing NSO Group over Pegasus spyware on her husband Jamal's phone, because that played a significant role in his alleged murder at the embassy there in Istanbul by Saudi Arabia. Uh,
Good.
she also plans to sue Saudi and the UAE governments over alleged surveillance attempts on her, in addition to, because it was, I guess, revealed that Jamal Khashoggi had Pegasus on his phone, although I don't remember how or when that was revealed. But apparently attempts were made on her as well. But I don't. That seems a little
Jennifer,
bit
do many
weird.
startups have started this data got my husband killed clauses in their giant infinite end user license agreements?
Hey, Tyler, are they suing in the U.S. or in some country in the EU
That's a good
area?
question.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it was in Turkey. It was in Turkey.
Interesting.
Yeah, Google's co-founder Larry Page flying car startup is winding down. Kitty Hawk. Um,
Most of the engineers have moved to another company that's doing something very similar.
I met one of the engineers, an American guy from Oregon. We were in Paris together. His partner is anyway, long story. Anyway, but it was a really fun lunch conversation where there's a small team working on Kitty Hawk, and it's kind of sad they're winding that down. I imagine that has to do with some of the cuts that they were talking about at the all hand meeting. Um, so next from BB, from anonymous hacked and leaked data of the first batch of 300,000 Russian men who will be conscripted, or pick your favorite verb.
Wait, the
Uh,
list leaked?
yes,
Yeah,
Holy
yes,
shit.
and there's about 300,000 names on the list.
yeah,
Can you
but that
imagine
is
if
known.
you're on that list how chaotic the life is about to get for like do you go to recruitment station or not? I mean, that's going to be crazy.
I think that echoes the tweet Tyler showed at the beginning of the room. That's why those flies are over the world.
Somebody shared a headline about the scenarios unfolding at these recruitment stations, for lack of a better word, and they even had a quote from the the boss at the front of the room, and there's a photo of all of the young men in the room looking not so happy as you could imagine. And he says, "Playtime is over. was the quote and for the article that he was that was the money phrase. Uh, wild, 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 wild. And there's a lot of interviews. I'm seeing lots of footage of interviews on the streets asking young Russian men if they would be willing to fight or not. It's a bit it's interesting to see the percentage that say they will. It's kind of 50-50 from the footage that I've seen.
But it's sad.
So
It's what's happening there right now.
Katerina has one. Do synchronized brains predict happy marriages? Couples who reported greater satisfaction with their marriage had greater neural synchronization while watching video clips associated with marriage.
Who
Okay,
runs these
and
studies? Who pays for them?
maybe the Mormon Church or some group who wants to promote marriage or something.
Definitely not divorce people.
If you ever if you ever see a consciousness study, I can guarantee you it's tied to a Buddhist funding source. It's actually kind of interesting how they sponsored a lot of neuroscience stuff, and that's one of those indirect things.
It
Can
might be
can we get a is that
Sam. Your mic never works as usual, and it's because it's too loud.
Microsoft, man?
Okay. Katerina found this one that the world's largest carbon removal project yet is headed for Wyoming.
Lots
Not
and
that it
lots
matters.
of cheap land in a friendly legislature that only has a very tiny number of representatives that you need to get support from.
Not that it matters where. I mean, the only reason it's going to Wyoming is, as Chris said, is because of cheap land. Because it doesn't matter where you do it, because it's pulling from the global atmosphere. It's not like it's going to clean the air out of Wyoming, for
I
example.
think it takes like a couple of days for CO2 to equalize across the entire plant. I need to look at the data on that better. But it's not very much. I know it guarantees to equalize over a year, but I think it equalizes closer to like a few day time frame. It's somewhere in between that.
So CRISPR-based, this one's from Pam. CRISPR-based HIV gene therapy administered to first human patient. A one-of-a-kind gene editing treatment, CRISPR has the potential to change the future of HIV therapeutics. Absolutely.
One of the reasons it's a big deal for that one specifically is that when you're changing tissue types, if you get something wrong, there's a bit of a thing. Also, ex vivo or inside the body is the big thing. One of the interesting things is that blood therapies are things that essentially where we can actually take extracts of the blood or immune system cells. Those are things that are easier to do genetic therapies on because we already have a whole toolkit to do that with. And then you can also experiment with all sorts of smaller models because as long as you've got nutrient supply, many of those cells can survive outside the body for short periods of time. When we get really good at these and injecting people and they don't develop horrific cancers, etc., then we can start moving on to full tissue types and synthetic organs, and stuff gets crazy after that with stuff. But that's a very exciting field to be in right now.
Pam, oh yeah. So indeed, the potential benefits of CRISPR. There was the huge, jubilant, correctly, understandably, um, you know, optimism, which is now we're starting to see the early fruits of this, which with curing HIV essentially, and it's hard to imagine how powerful this can be in the right hands, and equally concerning with how detrimental it could be in the wrong hands.
Please look up history of
So,
eugenics. It's going to become very relevant in the near future again. It's both good and bad. It's going to be very, very bizarre in the near future.
indeed, then you could start with the Chinese Shenzhen-based doctor who did the embryo
He
editing.
just got in trouble because he did it publicly rather than secretly by state funding.
Yeah, I think he did both actually. I think it's.
Oh, that's even worse.
I think that public act was to get the attention of the right people in China to take things to the next level.
Of interest, the doctor's trial for Nuremberg after World War II. Look up what essentially each one of the doctors did. You can click on their little wiki bios. And by the way, if you go to German Wikipedia, they have even more information than the English ones. Every single one of those doctors that created these horrific bio experimentation programs, etc., that they supposedly condemned a lot of Nazis for. Every single one of them got off with the light treatment and ended up being employed by many U.S. government agencies overseas with espionage stuff and secret bioweapons research. Look it up; it's public data, it's
And
public information. It's fascinating, essentially, look at the history of that because those sorts of programs never got entirely shut down. And it's something that ethically we're going to have an accounting for at some point. I'm kind of a little concerned about what they've been doing in the labs and secretly.
okay, Thomas Tong has one about an app called Whisper. Is an open source automatic speech recognition in real time app that's coming out. Amay has one that Russia more bullish on Bitcoin than ever as it legalizes crypto for international payments. The Bank of Russia and the Ministry of Finance have reached a consensus on the use of cryptocurrencies for international payments. Thomas Tong just found one that the AlphaFold developers win a $3 million breakthrough prize uh, for creating the system that predicts the 3D structure of proteins, is among 5 recipients of science's most lucrative awards because the Nobel Prize is only $1 million, mind you. But they give away a dozen or so of those. I don't know how many of these breakthrough prizes they give. It was, say, 5. Yeah, one of this year's prizes. So they give away 15 million there, and Nobel splits it up amongst a million amongst about a dozen. So anyway, good for them. Well deserved. That as well, like CRISPR, because this came out after CRISPR by a couple of years, and it only came out about a year ago. Will have potentially equally amazing outcomes in years to come. And the exuberance around it is also through the roof for a very good reason, and it could fundamentally change the world in ways that are hard to imagine today. So very well deserved. An artist receives the first known U.S. copyright registration for generative AI art. Registration of an AI-assisted comic book comes amid fierce online debate about AI art ethics. So the guy he made a comic book using AI-generated art, like Dolly 2. And now it's copywritten. Now the question, I guess, is the text in the comic book also AI generated by like GPT-3, for example? Well, why not? That would be rather trivial for GPT-3. And you could put both of those together at the same time and do GPT-3 with Dolly 2 and make a comic book. Kind of brilliant, actually. And then copyright it, which makes sense. You can copyright comic books all day long, which apparently this person did successfully, and it's the first known instance of it. So let the debate rage on about AI based intellectual property. Can AI create intellectual property?
Is Jennifer
So,
there?
oh yeah, that is a great question for Jennifer. Jennifer's there and she's unmuted. Did you want to comment on that one, Jennifer?
I think. Sorry, I was partially listening. So he was able to copyright what the AI generated.
Right.
Copy a comic book with words and images, and he copyrighted it.
It's interesting. I'll have to look into it. I know that there's been that big issue around patenting what AI outputs, but it may be because the AI generated it, but he claimed the copyright on it. That's once it's in writing, you just need to file it. So that might be why that was granted. But I'll have to look into it. That is an interesting area, especially as with all the themes that you're discussing and where we're going with AI.
One last one for today. The sneaky genius of Apple's AirPods empire. This is from Bloomberg, strangely, and it's talking about how AR VR headsets are a small market by Apple standards, but Tim Cook's massive headphone division shows just how big the company can make a niche product like that. The AirPods, which is this Bloomberg, they're like your aunt and uncle, at your holiday family get-togethers. They're a little behind on the curve, so there you go. They figured it out. AirPods are important. Okay, there you go. Happy Friday. Is Ben doing a room today?
No, he's not. He's taking a break today.
Okay. Well, then have a wonderful weekend. And